Well, good morning again. Some of the more observant among you probably noticed that the pulpit was pushed a little back, and you're wondering, why? Why on earth is that pulpit so far back? Well, that's because this week I'm going to do something a little different. Now, I'm not going to do this all the time, but occasionally you might see me preach a little bit of a different type of sermon. And that's because the Bible is mostly written in narrative forms. I mean, it's mostly composed of stories, history that happened. And the reason God teaches us in story is that when you teach through story, you don't tell someone about yourself. You don't tell someone something important. You show it. And story is actually the most common and most used form of teaching in the world. It's actually only in sort of our Western, European, and North American culture where we sort of like points laid out and things explained really neatly and clearly and explanations. Most people learn best through narrative. And what better way to learn or to hear a story than from someone who lived it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach the story, Luke chapter 8, 40 through 56, from the perspective of one of the characters in that story. Now, I'm not an actor. And I will say that if you're feeling some sort of secondhand embarrassment, that's fine, because at least you can pay attention to me. The point of doing this is to draw you into the story. So however that happens, I'm fine with that. You're like, this guy's nuts. Or this is, I don't know about this. Just pay attention. I remember very clearly the first time I met Jesus. I didn't really know what to think about him. I'd heard all sorts of things about him. I had heard that there was this teacher who was going around in our area, he had been to our town before, and he was healing people. He was doing amazing things. Blind people saw, lame people walked, people who had diseases, they vanished. And he was teaching things that some of it seemed to make sense, and some of it was really weird. Along with these good things we heard, I heard things that kind of troubled me about him as well. We had heard that he allowed basically a prostitute to fall at his feet and touch him and wash his feet in the middle of this very important, very dignified person's dinner party. He didn't rebuke her and send her away. And right before this, we had heard that he rowed across the lake with his disciples to go preach to the Gentiles on the other side of the Sea of Galilee for some reason. And he's made some pretty crazy claims. He says that he's come to fulfill prophecy. And I didn't know what to think about him. I thought the healing was great. Maybe he is like Elijah, come back. Maybe God has chosen him to prophesy, to preach to Israel. Maybe he's come to point the way to the Messiah. Maybe he is the Messiah. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know if he was good. I thought he was good. But I also thought maybe he was one of those two-bit magicians who doesn't really have any power, just trying to capture the crowd and maybe get a few coins thrown his way. Well, I had heard that he was coming back to our town. And I was desperate to find out who he really was, because my daughter, my only daughter, was very sick. She, just a few days before, she had been vibrant and full of life. She was now laying in bed, and we were sure she was going to die that day. She hadn't been able to drink even a sip of water since the day before. She was feverish and weak and listless and confused. My wife and I kept a constant vigil over her. But we just knew she didn't have long. She couldn't even cry out for help anymore. Through the night, she had cried, "Mom, Dad, Daddy, save me, help me." And now she didn't even have the strength to do that. If she was trying to call out for help, we couldn't hear it or understand it. As we were sitting there, my wife and I, waiting for her to breathe her final breath, a servant of mine burst into the room. He doubled over, out of breath. He said, Master, this Jesus you've heard about, he's coming back to town. And I wanted so much to believe because I knew that my daughter was going to die. And this Jesus was her last chance. It was her last chance to survive this. No one who is this sick survives. Not in my lifetime, not in my parents' lifetime. Nobody I have ever known has been this sick and lived. So I got up, walked out of my house, and I walked down to the shore where I knew Jesus was going to arrive. As I got to the shore, I saw that a crowd was already gathering. Word had gotten out that Jesus was coming, and off in the distance on the lake, we saw, among the boats, we saw a boat that was headed towards us. And that boat seemed to take forever to get here. I paced relentlessly. I looked around at the crowd as continuing to build, and I started to get nervous. I started to get worried. I prayed silently to God, and I could just feel this tension building within me. I hoped, I wanted to believe so bad that Jesus could and would heal my daughter, but that boat just came in so slowly. It seemed to get bigger and bigger and bigger, but it was like watching paint dry. And then my excitement started to build. Some of the people in the crowd who had seen this Jesus before looked out, and they could recognize him as one of the men in the boat. My heart leapt, and I wanted him to get here faster. Come on. And nothing I prayed or nothing I willed made that boat go faster. What felt like hours and hours and hours. Finally, the bow of that boat hit the soft mud of the shore, and four of his disciples jumped out, pulled that boat up so that their master could jump onto dry land and not get his robe messed up and get it wet. At that moment, up until that moment, I didn't know what I would say or how I would react, but I was overcome with grief. And I ran to him and I dove at his feet, and tears burst forth from me. I am a dignified man in my town. I'm a good citizen. I'm a ruler in the synagogue. And when I saw him and ran to him, all of that fell away from me. And all I could do was bow at his feet and plead with him to come to my home and heal my daughter. Please, Jesus, come. Follow me. Heal my daughter. She's dying. She might be dying right now. This very minute. Please come with me. And he looked down and he put his hand on my shoulder. I rose up and he began to follow me towards my home. And just as we turned and took a few steps, that crowd that had gathered to see him closed in around us like the waves of a storm. We were in the middle of a churning mass of humanity. People shouting questions, calling out to Jesus. Jesus, are you here to do miracles for us? Lord, I heard you preach, I believe. Lord, come to my house and stay with me. You can stay at my house. And I began to get annoyed because Jesus was not hurrying through this crowd. In fact, he had almost stopped moving as it pressed against him. And he was talking to people, answering them, and looking at them. And I almost wanted to reach back and pull him. And then, as I looked back at him, he froze. And he said something that at the time I just didn't understand. He said, "Who is the one who touched me?" And I thought, who is the one who touched you? Who is the one who touch you. You're in a crowd. There are dozens and dozens of people. 20 people touched you in the time it took you to ask, who is the one who touched me? I was angry and frustrated and fearful, thinking, does Jesus care about my daughter? Why is he allowing himself to be distracted by all these things that aren't important? And his disciple Peter must have had a similar thought to me, because he said, Master, you're in the middle of a crowd. And Jesus just looked at Peter and said, who is the one who touched me? I felt power go out from me. And the crowd around him, everyone in the crowd around him denied that they had been the one who touched him. Nobody wanted to admit that they had been the one to reach out. Until Jesus' eyes locked on one woman. And knowing she couldn't hide, she stepped forward and dropped to her knees and said, I'm the one who touched you. Now this woman, she had a condition where she bled continuously for 12 years. And she told Jesus how she believed that all she had to do to be healed was to reach out and touch the hem of his garment. And that if she could do that, she would be healed. And Jesus, without any apparent hurry or urgency, looked down at her and said, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Do not be afraid. I was filled with rage at this. This woman had been bleeding for 12 years. Jesus could have healed her in an hour, or later that afternoon, or tomorrow, or next week, or next month. This was not an emergency. And sure, yeah, her bleeding made her life hard. She hadn't been able to be ritually clean the entire time. She hadn't been able to go to the temple and pray during any of the festivals. And yeah, she had been an outcast because of it. But she would be alive tomorrow and my daughter wouldn't. Does Jesus care? Does he understand what's going on here? Does he realize that this is not a priority, but my daughter is a priority? Does he realize how desperate we are? Did I not explain it right? Is he just so into himself that he'd rather sit here and soak up the adoration of the crowd than go and help me? Why is he wasting his time on this woman right now? I didn't understand it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was just almost bursting. And then, as he finished telling this woman that it was her faith that healed her, a friend of mine appeared, coming from the direction of my house. And as he got close to me, he said, your daughter is already dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. At that moment, I wasn't angry anymore or scared. I was overcome with grief. And for an instant, I felt like all I wanted to do was fall down on that spot and drown in my own grief and sorrow. When I had heard that Jesus was coming to our town that day, I thought, this is happening for a reason. He is going to come and he is going to heal my daughter. Why would she be so close to death today when this traveling miracle worker, who everyone says he can heal people, is here? And then he's here, and I get his attention, and he starts to follow me, and this crowd comes in, and they detain him, and they slow him down, and then this woman who has a problem, but it's not really an emergency, stops him in his tracks, and while this is going on, she dies. What are you doing, God? What are you doing? And as I sat there, heartbroken, not wanting to move, Jesus looked at me and he said, "Don't worry. Do not be afraid. I can still heal." And we got up and he followed me to my house. Now as we walked to my home, I didn't know what to think anymore. He told me, "Believe that your daughter will be healed." Part of me believed. Through my despair and my frustration and all the sadness that was pressing down on my soul, his words, they brought me a tiny little bit of hope. Despite what I knew about death and sickness, I thought maybe he still can do this. It's the only chance I had. So I walked with him. And as we approached my home, I saw that the mourners had already begun to gather there outside my home. Our family, our friends, our neighbors, and they were wailing and weeping for my daughter. You see, my daughter, aside from being my only daughter, she was a person that people loved. And their grief was real. They were just now beginning to realize that that beautiful, kind, happy, funny little girl was dead. And she was dead before she had even really had a chance to live her life. When we got there, we arrived at my doorstep, and Jesus turned, and again, with no sense of hurry or urgency, he turned and addressed his disciples in the crowd, and he chose 3 of them to go in the house. Only 3 of them. The rest had to wait outside. And my wife and I could go. It was very clear. Everyone else had to stay outside. People who were there mourning said, "She's already dead." And in the strangest way I've ever heard anyone speak, so full of peace and calm and confidence, he said, "She's not dead. She's just asleep." Those mourners began to laugh because they had all been around death before. Some of them had been inside the house and had seen her body. There was no doubt that she was dead. And they knew that nobody comes back from that. Once you're dead, you are dead. No traveling magician, no prayer to God, no holy traveling rabbi can come and bring that person back. Or so they thought. Jesus ignored the laughter and we went inside the home. Now he walked through the house and over to the bed where my daughter's body lay. And as I watched him, I was kind of wondering, what's he going to do? I waited for him to begin some long, drawn-out, eloquent prayer to God to bring my daughter back to life, or maybe he had some sort of magical talisman in his cloak that he was going to pull out, or maybe he had some magic incantation that he was going to say. But before I even realized what was happening, he reached down, grabbed my daughter's hand and said, "Child, get up." And before he was done speaking, her eyes flew open and she stood up like nothing had ever been wrong with her. I was sitting on my butt. In an instant, I don't know how I got there. My wife was collapsed in a chair. We didn't know what to say. It was so quick and so immediate. We were shocked. She was dead. Now she's alive. I almost can't even think about it without being overcome in that moment. Before we had had even a minute to gather ourselves, he said, "Get her some food. Don't tell anyone what you saw here. And he walked out. We got her some food because I guess if you die and you get brought back to life after being really sick, you're probably pretty hungry. And she ate the food. And then I kind of realized later on, after I had heard the stories of what happened to Jesus afterwards, why he told us to do that. See, after he died, and after he defeated his own death, after God raised him from the dead, when he presented to himself to his disciples, he ate with them to prove that it was really him, that he was really back, and that it wasn't some ghost or some spirit, that he was alive in his body. Now, I don't think that his direction to me not to tell what happened there holds anymore. So I don't think I'm doing wrong by sharing this story with you. And as I look back and reflect on what I learned from this, and what I learned about God from this, a few things come to mind. The first thing is that God gives to people when and how he chooses. And that his gifts, his blessings to other people, they don't come at the cost of him blessing you. He is never too busy helping someone else to help you. While I sat there filled with frustration and anger and fear at what I thought was God dallying, dawdling, instead of rushing to help me, he was completely in control. Found out later he could have healed my daughter with a word from where he was. And that when he told me he was going to restore my daughter, as I pled with him, at that instant, I should have trusted that nothing could prevent him from doing that. That time did not matter. He was completely in control. And that I had nothing to fear. So, I was wrong. I was wrong to think that by healing, by helping, and by blessing that woman, God was refusing to help me, or that he had given his miracle for that day, or his healing for that day, or his blessing for that day to someone else, and that I would just have to wait until he had another one to give. It's not how God works. God helps and heals every person he chooses to help, and he helps them completely. Completely to the extent that he chooses to help them. And there is nothing and no one that can stop him from doing that. And I also learned that even a faith that is small and timid can become a witness. Jesus undoubtedly knew that that woman who reached out and grabbed him had been healed. He didn't need to proclaim that. He didn't wonder what had happened. He knew. But he wanted that woman to realize that her small, timid faith could grow, and that she could declare boldly what happened to her. In fact, that's what he wanted her to do. And lastly, I learned that God's timing is not our timing. And this is often the biggest barrier to trusting in God, is that we have all around us things that we think are urgent. God needs to act now, or it's going to be too late. God, you need to fix this situation in my life because I can't do it. And if you don't do something now, my life's going to be ruined. If you don't do something now, then all these plans that I have for my life will become impossible. If you don't heal me of this, if you don't give me what I want, what I think I need, when I think I need it, then it's all going to come crashing down. That's not how it works. Because God will give those who love him and trust him what they need when they need it. That's what his word says. His word says that God works all things for the good of those who love him. And that means that when we think it's impossible for him to help us, for him to love us, he still will. That means that what we think we need, or what we think is the good that we need, when that doesn't happen, that's not really the good we need. My name is Jairus. And Jairus means the Lord will awaken. It has the same root as the word Jireh, which was the name of the mountain that Abraham went to when God tested him and provided the sacrifice that he needed. The Lord will provide. The Lord will see to it, was what Abraham learned that day. I don't think my name is an accident. Please pray with me. Father, through your word, we hear story upon story of your goodness and provision, even when situations were hopeless to our eyes. I pray that you will give each of us faith to believe in your goodness, to trust that you will do what you have said you will do, regardless of the circumstances of our life, the struggles we have, the losses we fear, even the losses we experience. Father, help us to trust you in all things, at all times. In Jesus' precious name we pray.